And this gentleman over here.
On the mix, the 70-30, 60-40, whatever it happens to be. I mean, in reality, its prime use, sadly, is to actually eke out some money from the property developers. That's really what its prime use is. It may have an advantage in stirring up some debate about how much social housing we build. But in major developments, most of the discussion that takes place there between the developer and the council is about the level, how not to achieve the 30% or the 40% or 50%, and what the cost of that would be. So in a real sense, what we're talking about is not so much how do we actually achieve social affordable housing based on a ratio. The real argument is what's the best ratio to achieve the best buyout from the developers for not building social affordable housing on site.
So what are you suggesting the policy should say? At the moment we have a 30%. What is it that you're suggesting for our document that we need to
well, I have to say that if the reality is, and the gentleman on our left hinted at it actually earlier, if the reality is that that's the debate that will take place between the developer and the local authority on how not to build social housing because of the cost of doing that to the developer, then let's get a ratio that attracts the maximum amount of money from the developer. And I don't care what it is, but 50%, I don't mind. But if that's what the argument really is about, then let's look at it in real terms about what money it's going to yield to put into the affordable housing pot.
Okay. And this gentleman just here.
Thank you. Just to clarify something, I'm a little bit confused. You're talking about affordable housing, meaning a mixture. Social housing to rent and social housing to sell. That's what you mean by affordable housing. As I understand it, the money that's going to build this social housing is money that the developers have paid into the pot not to build social housing.
No, that's not quite. Perhaps we could have some clarity from one of the officers.
Let me finish first, then you can clear it rather. Assuming that the money is going to be used to build this is money that is being paid by developers not to build social housing. And I believe it runs well over 20 million or something that Westminster has allowed the developers to buy out. If this was social housing money, this is money that
can I clarify? It's not what we're talking about. This is money in this pot
that you've got because social housing wasn't built. And we were told, according to the councillor said, we've lost some 2,000 properties, social housing properties, this way. If you're going to use that money then should be used purely for social housing. Yeah. Now, I may be wrong, but
I think, can I just clarify a factual point?
Yeah.
This is not about how we split spending the money that we have received from developers in lieu of affordable housing. It is not about that. This is about when we have a development, we require a proportion of it to be affordable housing. And this is a discussion about on-site provided by the developer and then given to an RSL or in some other mechanism to be provided. It most certainly is not a debate about the proportions of what we spend that affordable housing fund on. So I just wanted to be clear about that.
From to the developer. The developer will want a certain amount of money to go in. Who pays that money? Where's that money come from?
Well, the developer subsidises the provision of affordable housing through the development itself, and they also often get funding from the government to support that. So I hope that answers the question.
No money's coming from Westminster.
That's right.
This part. No money's coming from what the builders paid before.
When the developers pay in lieu of social housing, they then sell those properties on the open market. They don't go back into social housing with an RSL. They sell them on the open market privately. And they increase their profits.
This is simply about when there's a housing development or housing is provided, a certain percentage of those homes have to be affordable housing.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's all we're talking about. So we're not talking about the exchange of money. We're saying
but they never are
But why not?
for that purpose. They are bought back by the developer and they pay the council X amount of millions of pounds to buy those properties back off of them
Oh, you're talking about to buy council things.
Sorry, if we could go to the councillor at the back, please.
That does not happen.
Always been
Can
my belief.
if you can tell me where that happens, we'll look into it. But I can tell you it does not happen.
Sorry.
Yeah, when we're talking about the redevelopment, and I gave you my thing on the SW1, Maida Vale, whatever.
Oh, sorry.
Well, you're not really, I don't think you're working for me, but I'll talk louder. No, what I find, right, is that we're shoved at the back. So our keepers, which is supposed to be Westminster City Council, are not looking after us as people, because the developer is shrewd enough to know whoever wants to buy into these flats, and the name we get from social housing that we're nearly the dregs of the earth anyway, right? They do not want to see us or our washing on a balcony or etc. etc. So therefore, it's downgrading us as people. And if the Westminster City Council, who says yes, I know what the government says, that the developer comes in, but we do not get the quality of housing which he has given to his others, and if he doesn't, you, the council or the government, whichever way it would be, should bring up standards that we are on some sort of equal to these people.
I think we've definitely recorded that.
Yeah, but you may record it, but
Yeah.
it's been going on for so many years, but who listens?
Okay.
And the planners, whatever it is, has got to start looking on where we're going to live. Because we are the ones who's going to give you students. We are the ones who's going to have doctors out of our children, etc., etc. And it's not fair.
In terms of the, I think this was raised earlier actually, in terms of the social and intermediate, we had a discussion about what intermediate housing is, and the fact that intermediate housing is for those who can't access social housing, but they also can't afford market housing. So we've looked at intermediate housing, and what this next question is about is the relative proportions of social housing and intermediate housing. So when a development comes forward and it includes housing, a proportion of that needs to be affordable, and this is about the mix of that affordable housing.
Yes, excuse me, but this sounds to me like a very transparent link, because obviously into your intermediate housing goes all your hostel hotel dwellers, surely.
No, this would be like, say, a shared ownership scheme where somebody, they get a mortgage for, say, 50% of the property, and then they rent the other 50% so that...
Something like that.
Well, it's quite popular.
Put them into intermediate type housing and then pay the hotel bills.
No, it's not. Sorry.
It's the right to buy.
The councillor can just respond. Oh,
Can I just clarify, as earlier said, it's for the particular group of people who don't qualify for social rent, who are unable to afford market housing, and it's a sort of a graduation through that process to enable people to get a foothold into the home ownership market on the shared ownership side, or perhaps to provide them with sub-market rent cheaper than the full market level where they can't afford the market equivalent.
So one example might be for key workers, for nurses, the police, and
I'm sorry, I
those.
was actually thinking that you were talking about homeless people.
Yeah, no.
What about the other workers?
All right, this gentleman here.
The last thing I want to do is to stop people buying their own property. I own my flat. I'm not going to stop people who want to buy a flat. But in terms of a policy, we have to be driven by politics, and policy is about how you prioritise the needs that have to be met. It is clear the priorities in Westminster and elsewhere, not just Westminster, are high levels of people living in temporary accommodation, and a high number of people living in overcrowded accommodation. And whatever else our policy drivers do, that has to be the first priority. Whatever falls off that in terms of extra, that's fine. But we mustn't allow a concept, and a misunderstood concept about so-called mixed communities to be driving this, because intermediate housing is not about mixed communities. That's quite clear, because if you make intermediate housing a priority, what you're doing, and the lady referred to the earlier part of it, you're actually indulging in something called social engineering. And we all know about social engineering in Westminster.